Alrighty, we got a brand new series for you. We're going to be doing 10 games, and this one is Solitaire Chess. And this comes directly from the USCF's magazine, Chess Life. Back in the day when I started as a chess player, they had this great column, and I'm pretty sure one of the bosses of chess, Bruce Pandolfini, was handling it. And basically, you would play Guess the Move across all the moves. Coach Matt has been working on his middle game, and I figured I would throw him some positions from my games. And it's something that I recommend as you guys are watching these videos. I've gotten some complaints lately that are like, your videos are too short. How come you don't play really long games? How don't you don't show every idea you're thinking? You know, honestly, the videos are short because I prefer them that way. And content is free, so content is content. Well, Coach Matt, hopefully he's able to get something out of this. We're going to have some fun doing these. And I will go quickly through certain parts, but if you're following along playing the home game, pause the video throughout as I'm asking questions, and you can try to get something out of the lesson as well. Instead of being a passive learner, be an active learner, because that's how these things stick. So without further ado, in this game, I was playing white against a 2300 in Lee Chess, and it is, all of these games are either 3-0 or 1-0, so the quality does wane, but they do have their interesting moments, and we'll let the people at home get some enjoyment out of it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in, and we're going to get to a certain structure before we get our first question. And as you've been seeing on the channel, we had the Philidor series, and this structure is very, very similar to the Philidor in its picture, where we've got the pawn on e5 and d6. Typically, the bishop goes to e7, queen goes to c7, and then the c8 bishop is going to develop as well. So black has a pretty typical plan, and one of the things that I'm often working on is playing against people who play automatic chess. And what I mean by that is they play their entire opening without really having to think. So I look for any spot that I can find to break their opening. And that's one of the cues for Coach Matt here when I ask him his first question.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and look at this position, and there's multiple ways for white to play. What would be 3 candidate moves? And we're going to be going through using Kotov's thinking process from Think Like a Grandmaster. So essentially, you pick 3 candidate moves quickly and then decide on one of them, because we're treating this as if this is a practical game. I'm not allowing Coach Matt to just analyze forever, because it's easy to find good moves when we have time to think. It's much harder in the pressure of a real game, and we want to treat it more like a training scenario, so there's a limited amount of time for each question.
All right, so during the time you were speaking, I did have a chance to look a little bit more deeply, so later on it will be more immediate answers. But the first things that came to mind were d2, d4, knight c3, or d3.
Okay, and all 3 are reasonable, and all 3 are going to get to variations. I would rule out knight c3, simply because it is a move that's typically going to transpose later, but I want to give my opponent more chances to go wrong. And it's a comparison between d3 and d4. d3 is a typical Englishy move, we'll say, as white's just doing normal development. So d3, knight c3, rook b1, a3, b4, and that's a typical English plan, as we'll see in an upcoming series by N.M. Bernanke. So the move that I actually played is d4, the first one recommended, and typically when people recommend, that first one they recommend is the one that they're leaning towards in the first place. So d4, and this gives black an opportunity to go wrong compared to the other 2 lines, because if he captures on d4, already knight takes d4, and black doesn't have any firm ground in the center to stand on. So queen c7, and he's just going through the normal typical moves still. Bishop e7. And now, here's another position of what to do. Because we're already getting to the point where we've almost defined the entire structure, and then we're going to have to come up with a plan.
Okay. First moves that come to mind are e4, e3, and maybe bishop g5.
Okay. Which one do you lean towards and why?
Probably e4 to prevent the pawn push to e4. Also, if they capture, knight captures, it's kind of a... If it just feels like a solid ground in the center of the board, controlling d5, preventing black's pawn push to d5, which they probably want to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I ask these questions because you can get the right move, but you can occasionally have the wrong rationale. And that's why for the people playing the home game, I wanted to say e4 is the move that I chose, and I believe it's objectively the best move. Mm-hmm. But if it was black's move here and he played e4, this really wouldn't be a problem because of knight g5, where we'll have the bishop on g2, the knight on c3, and the knight on g5 all hitting e4, in which case after d5, the queen's going to be misplaced. There's potentially bishop f4 ideas, as well as f3 can just slam the center and blow the board up, which is going to open the f file for white, and everything just kind of flows.
Okay.
So we're not so much worried about e4 from the sense that black will play it, but this is to, I am firmly taking ground in the center, and you can't ever take it away.
Okay.
Now, this next move, I wanted to show a line that, say, for instance, what black will typically play in these scenarios, and then we'll see what my opponent played in the game.
Okay.
So castle's kingside is the normal way to play, then h3, and then this move is just simply, if I want to play bishop e3, I don't want to allow knight g4. And you often see this in these like fianchetto, King's Indian, or Old Indian structures where h3 is this comfort move that's played just to control g4. So after rook e8, then bishop e3, and after bishop f8, it's kind of like he's slow playing into King's Indian if he goes g6, bishop g7, except white's many tempi ahead. So black's going to elect to go with a different plan with queenside expansion. That's the only real plan in the position, so white just needs to be playing against that. And this is going to be a key memory marker for later when we go back to the main game. If this is black's only plan, if we can stop this plan, we break his back.
Okay.
So queen c2. And this is just keeping an eye on e4. And again, we're welcoming black to capture on d4. We'll take with the knight. And white then has multiple plans. We could focus on the weak d6 pawn or play for big expansion and attack on the king side. And it's player's choice at that point, where black is just going to have kind of a passive position that we can grind out.
May I ask a question here?
Yeah, go ahead.
For this idea of the king side expansion, is it only okay because black's only plan is to attack on the queen side?
I would say it's okay in this scenario because black can't really punish the extension.
Okay.
Where we'll see like double-edged in, say, a closed Sicilian or like a King's Indian attack against the Sicilian, it can be double-edged to do it.
Okay.
But here, I don't really see a repercussion for white going all out here. I can just gradually fling pawns at the black king.
Okay.
So a6, rook c1. Again, we're looking to prepare to meet b5. And I, in fact, played against one of the foremost specialists in the world who plays this system, Grandmaster Zapata, and had white in a very similar position. And I actually played a4 on the recommendation of... it was a book, but I can't remember which one, and I'm not going to disparage the author, because I feel that that move is objectively wrong. Because why try to prevent something when it's not good? So this goes along to
Interesting.
black can just sit. But a4 is not going to be the typical move. After b5 takes. He can't take the other way due to knight takes b5. Now we're simply going to take in the center, and we don't want the trades. Now, knight d4, and we're already in very, very excellent shape with white. Black has a snaggletooth pawn structure, a weak d6 pawn forever. We still have the f4 plan. It's just easy. b3, just really cementing, I control everything in the position. You don't even get the c4 square. And then we alleviate the pin. And this is where I would say that white has an easy edge moving forward with I can maneuver playing moves like knight c to e2 or play for f4, g4, and expansion. So this is what we're going for, typically. Now my opponent, on the other hand, played h6. And keep in mind, this is still a formidable opponent. He's a 2300 elite chess. And I had seen this plan before and knew that there was a problem with it. So I'd already had this or something similar in my notes. So I had an idea of what my opponent's going for. And keep in mind, 3-minute game. What's your first reaction to seeing h6? What's Black's plan?
Probably g5, g4, go for a kingside attack, castle queenside.
Yeah, and I mean, trying to go queenside though in this position is essentially just not going to happen. He doesn't have enough time. So with White, 3 candidate moves.
Your suggestion with h3 still still seems okay. If the plan is to go g5, I'm thinking of maybe knight to h4 and sink into f5. Okay. And then a third candidate move. Maybe a simple development move like bishop to e3, but same thing, h3 I'd rather have with the
h3.
The same idea.
And yeah, I think knight h4, it takes away the potential of the knight being able to capture on d4. So I would rule that one out. And then bishop e3 I rule out because of the knight g4 plan again. So h3, it's normal, it's natural, it goes along with the typical plan. And this is why it's important to understand the main line in a position to go backwards when you get some sort of weird or substandard move from your opponent.
Okay.
Now, knight f8 was played, and I'm still going along with the normal structure. I know what the guy's doing, but I'm just getting my pieces on the typical squares because there's no problems. Now, g5. Okay, this is a critical position. White to move. 3 options.
My normal reactionary stuff would like to play knight to d2. But there's no rush at the moment, so I'm going to go with what we had in the earlier variation, maybe rook c1 or queen c2, and maybe even b4. That'll be my 3 options other than knight d2, which I just said no to myself.
Okay, exactly. But it's interesting because, again, we see your first inclination, and it's one of the things I've noticed in middle game positions is that sometimes as soon as you see an attack, you get that, like, I'm going to put up to defend.
Yeah.
Instead of going for the most active move, which both of us actually missed. You found the move that I played in the game, but the idea came one move later because I was already looking at it.
Okay.
So rook c1 was what I played in the game.
Okay.
But c5 right now, because of the uncoordinated position of Black's pieces, breaks us back. I was just getting in one more move before playing c5.
Okay.
Now, if dc, knight d5. And this is absolutely crushing. This is what I had in my notes. So after cd, ed, Black is completely in a ball. Queen b6 trying to get away, rook e1. The position really plays itself because Black's having to basically contort himself just to survive. But after e6, it's a completely overwhelming position where Black's king's stuck in the middle and all of White's pieces are developed. A very, very worthy gambit.
Reminds me of the book by Vukovic, Art of Attack, crushing the uncastled king.
And this is it. My opponent played knight f8, and this is one of those I'm looking to punish this type of idea. Rook c1, and since we hit on the main idea, I'll quickly go through the rest of the game, and then we'll get on to the next video. So knight g6, and my opponent missed the opportunity to get counterplay. h3 is to prevent knight g4, so g4 screams to be played, and this position would have been roughly equal. Knight h4, g takes h3, bishop f3 again, controlling g4 is more important, and after rook g8, knight f5, kind of like an idea that you suggested earlier with knight h4, knight f5, and it's a bit of a mess, but White's still better because Black's king's a bit awkward still.
So forcing Black to waste the time to get your knight to a good square.
Right.
Okay.
So knight g6, c5, absolutely critical move that people who are playing against the old Indian or Ukrainian system need to know when Black is wasting time with this knight journey or this kingside attack, which I often see in bullet. So e takes d4, cd6 in between, knight takes, and different than our other position, aggression. Knight d to b5, where there's just no slowing down here, and the punishment just continues. h4, you will get no counterplay. Knight f5, I don't want to trade. I want to keep the tension. I want to make sure black stays in a ball as long as possible. All of my pieces are active. I'm not in a hurry to say grab the pawn on h6. Nah, I want to get the most out of this. Only now do I grab on h6 because if he trades queens, I'm okay. I'm going to get the c7 square and keep piling up on f7. Plays knight takes e4. Like I said, take on f7. Now, to his credit, black is trying to get fancy in the position and doing what he can to make a mess of it, which is a good idea, especially in fast time controls. But I'm simply going to protect my pieces, check, and force things even more so. I'm okay with trading down because as the dust settles, I'm up a clean bishop, and that's typically enough. And the game will be ending shortly due to the extra piece. And I was going to get fancy if my opponent continued to play on here, because I was going to mate with knight and bishop, but he made the wise decision after bishop d6 of simply resigning. Otherwise, we would have had the treat of knight and bishop mate. So that will do it for our first game in the series. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Just wanted to try something new, and hopefully Coach Matt got a little bit out of it.
Yeah, it's a lot. Thank you.